Hello and welcome to the second ever episode of Leap to the Past, my series, hopefully, of stories of my past, which are hopefully interesting to you because they were interesting to me. Video game people may realize that Justin's Leap to the Past LTTP is an homage to the very famous, very beloved Super Nintendo game Zelda Link to the Past LTTP. See what I did there? Okay, so today I wanted to talk about my history as a pro wrestler. So from about the age of 22, I started training and performing as a professional wrestler. However, I did a little something before that. So I wanted to talk about my first match, but because I did a little something before I got properly trained, there's kind of two stories. So let's see if we can throw them into this 10-minute or less format. So the first one, I got in with some wrestling people. Guy who became a real dear friend of mine, Bill Shields, was a kind of hardcore wrestler back in the 90s. And he was promoting a show in Cleveland for an upstart indie promotion. Hardcore wrestling, it was going to be called. And I was part of the Gwar internet community and had some experience with the band Gwar. Gwar is a band of heavy metal space barbarians that slaughter things on stage as they play heavy metal music, and they've been my favorite band for a long time. That'll be many other stories, but I was able to get Gwar to appear on this indie hardcore wrestling show, and kind of as a reward they let me have a match. And what my match consisted of was a squash match, which those of us who were raised in the 80s kids remember watching WWF wrestling on Saturday mornings, and it wasn't like the competitive matches that we see on Monday Night Raw or SmackDown. It was guys who you knew kicking the crap out of guys that you didn't know. Squash matches, squashing them, just really, one-sided battles. So I got a squash match where I came out as a slave of Techno Destructo, who was Gwar's arch nemesis, played by Hunter Jackson, a guy I admire greatly. And he walked me to the ring. This giant guy, Beast, who wasn't very tall, but he was about 350 pounds, big black dude, kind of looked like Abdullah the Butcher a little bit. And pretty much what happened was Beast cracked me over the head with a street sign that I actually brought, like a neighborhood watch sign that was yay big. Just cracked me over the head as hard as he could, probably. And I crumpled, and then he splashed on top of me, and that was about it. That was the end of me. So before the match, they were trying to get me in the ring because I'd never actually been in the ring before, and Beast had this sign that I had brought, and Bill told him, crack him one good time, and he pasted me, and I went down, partially because I knew I was supposed to go down, but also partially because it hurt a lot. And Bill told me later that he said a little prayer for me because he was that worried about me. As I said, he went on to become a dear friend and still is, and I love him. He's battling ALS right now, which he's in my prayers constantly. So then I moved to Minnesota to work for Game Informer magazine. Many stories out of that, but I started training with Eddie Sharkey and Terry Fox. Now, Eddie Sharkey, for hardcore wrestling fans, was a guy from the AWA who went on to train the Road Warriors, Bob Backlund, Jesse Ventura, Rick Rude, like all the kind of greats from the Minnesota area were trained by Eddie Sharkey, Sean Waltman, 1-2-3 Kid. And I started training with him and picked it up pretty fast. Eddie wasn't really in the ring so much. It was Terry Fox, his partner, who was teaching me the bumps, running the ropes, all that stuff, and I was doing pretty well. And, they always say, always bring your gear to a wrestling show. You never know when you're going to get booked. I was too green at the time, too young at the time to even have gear, but I showed up to a show to support the cause, and Terry said, well, you're having your first match tonight. I was like, okay, yeah, if you think I'm ready. And Terry, who's about 285 pounds, looks kind of like Sergeant Slaughter's paunchier brother, gave me his singlet, which a singlet's kind of like a leotard and was designed to kind of corral a body that goes out to here, not a body that goes out to here. So it looked kind of goofy. I wore Terry's boots as well. Now, luckily, I had a character. I had shaved my head bald and had a pointy beard for some reason, and it just kind of stood to reason that I would have a German character. People love Germans in wrestling. Baron von Raschke, lots of German. The stereotype character was a big deal back then. So I was Helmut von Strauss. Helmut von Strauss. I thought Helmut was funny because I had no hair, so I was bald. It looked like a helmet. And I was wrestling. Now I would go to wrestling camp about 2 or 3 times a week, and there were, say, a dozen guys there that I knew. Guys like Robbie Thunder, Big Daddy Hoofery, and Xavier. There was a group of dudes that I knew and that knew me and I felt comfortable working with. I did not wrestle any of them. I wrestled a guy named the Chi-Town Thug, who was a stocky, kind of no-nonsense brawler sort of guy. So I was wearing somebody else's gear, wrestling a guy that I didn't know. But in a weird place, Waverly, Minnesota, in this bar atmosphere, tiny little bar in the middle of nowhere. But luckily, my good friend Sean Davari, who went on to a WWE career, he was my referee. He came to camp maybe a month after me when he was 15 years old, like 130 pounds, soaking wet, but a real good mind for the business, and we became good friends. And he was the ref for my match, so at least I felt somewhat comfortable with that. But it wasn't a squash match, but Chi-Town beat me up pretty well. He took relatively good care of me, but he definitely, I was in a fight. I remember him throwing me into the corner and me kind of whiplashing back so hard that I smacked the back of my head on the turnbuckle post behind there, or maybe when he splashed me in and he gave me kind of a inverted DDT like Sting used to do, and I don't think I bumped right for that, so like my nose got all bloody in his armpit or something. But that was my first match, and that's how I broke in. I think it wasn't too long later that I went and got my own gear. I got my own boots that serve me to this day. I don't wear them every day, but they're still a good quality pair of boots. And I was going to throw them away, but my best friend Austin Aries said, "Don't throw away your boots," and he was right, because I used them later, and that'll be another story. So yeah, that started my 5-year Minnesota independent wrestling career. I went to Green Bay and Canada and other places. So yeah, that's my leap to the past for today. My first wrestling matches, once as a trained wrestler, once as a not so trained wrestler, but under the watchful eye of Bill Shields. And so thus ends episode 2 of Justin's Link to the Past. If you liked it, I have a lot of other stories to tell, stories from the video game industry, from touring with Guar, from now as an actor here in Tokyo. So yeah, I want to share them with you. Hopefully you're interested too. Give me a thumbs up if you're into it, and maybe consider subscribing to this fledgling YouTube account that used to just kind of host video game captures and stunt reels and all that sort of stuff. And I'll see you next time. Thanks.